Okay, Analytica Posteriora, Posterior Analytics, translated by G.R.G. Muir, Book 1. All instruction given or received by way of argument proceeds from pre-existent knowledge. Anything we say, any ideas we use to convey things, comes from knowledge that exists before those ideas. Sentence number 1. This guy doesn't mess around. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the good old days of YouTube philosophical debate. This is the golden age. So let us continue. Snuggling up by the fire, cup of coffee or a beer or whichever you choose, and snuggle in for some good hard thinking. Here we go. So, all instruction given or received comes from pre-existent knowledge. This becomes evident upon a survey of all the species of such instruction. The mathematical sciences and all other speculative disciplines are acquired in this way, and so are the two forms of dialectical reasoning, syllogistic and inductive. For each of these latter makes use of old knowledge to impart new, the syllogism assuming an audience that accepts its premises, induction exhibiting the universal as implicit in the clearly known particular. Induction always has to come down to a clearly known particular, which gives us, or is a piece of evidence for, gives us a sight of a universal. For example, one lightning storm, particular. Electricity is what a lightning storm is. Generalization. Anytime, any continent, anywhere. So induction exhibiting the universal as implicit in the clearly known particular. Again, the persuasion exerted by rhetorical arguments, the reason that arguments of words and stuff is persuasive, is in principle the same, since they use one of the two. A kind of induction is the one thing, or a kind of syllogism. Now he has a word for a syllogism, E-N-T-H-Y-M-E-M-E. Enthymeme? I've never heard that word before, but he uses it as a synonym of syllogism here. The pre-existent knowledge required is of two kinds. Skipping just a bit. We assume that every predicate can be either truly affirmed or truly denied of any subject, and that triangle means so-and-so. As regards unit, we have to make the double assumption of the meaning of the word and the existence of the thing. So anytime, this seems obvious, but some people don't think that it is, anytime that you assume a unit, you have to assume, quote, the meaning of the word and the existence of the thing that the word denotes. The reason is that these several objects are not equally obvious to us. Hold that in your pocket, and it might clarify in just a second here, but here's a bit that's easier. Recognition of a truth may in some cases contain as factors both previous knowledge and also knowledge acquired simultaneously with that recognition. Okay, so recognition of a truth may come from factors of previous knowledge and knowledge acquired with that recognition. In other words, you may know 5 things or 3 things, and someone just names these 3 things to you and then points something out. In other words, as in Ayn Rand's terminology, they integrate it for you. They point out a concept or a similarity or something. They connect thought. They connect several things together in a concept. And he says, with that recognition comes knowledge. So he says some cases of learning can be information that you already knew, just laid out in a certain order, and then a certain thing pointed out about that. He says that can be a way of learning things. Let's go down just a bit here. For example, the student knew beforehand that the angles of every triangle are equal to 2 right angles. But it was only the actual moment at which he was being led on to recognize this as true in the instance before him that he came to know this figure inscribed in the semicircle to be a triangle. For some things, viz. The singulars reached, which are not predicable of anything else as subject, are only learnt in this way. Some things are only learnt in this way. Now he enters a clarification which I found obfuscating, but I will read it for the benefit of those of you who can take it. I.e., so he says, let's just take from the sentence, some things are only learnt in this way, i.e., there is no recognition through a middle of a minor term as subject to a major. I don't know what minor, middle, and major term is, and for something to be subject to it. I don't know any of those terms, so that sentence means nothing to me. But for you that can take it, there it is. Before he was led on to recognition, or before he actually drew a conclusion, we should perhaps say that in a manner he knew, in a manner not. So the student, says Aristotle, in a manner knew, and in a manner didn't. Because before he was led to the conclusion of connecting these things, in the thought, in the integration, in the concept that the teacher points out, or the author or philosopher, or whichever. Up till that point, he in a manner knew, and in a manner did not. So ignorance sometimes consists merely of not having a given thought interjected. Sometimes the evidence is already there. Now it talks about, within the context of mathematics, do you know that every pair is even? Because if you take a pair of threes, 3, 3, they're even. 3 apples and 3 grapes might not be, but in mathematics 3 and 3 is even. Any given pair of a number is even, by definition. So, there was a philosophical quandary for the Greeks. Do you know that every pair is even? Some philosophers would answer, no, I don't know that every pair is even because I haven't seen every pair. But here's the quandary. Aristotle says, the solution which some people offer is to assert that they do not know that every pair is even, but only that everything which they know to be a pair is even. So, I don't know that every pair is even, but if you point a pair out to me, then yes, I will identify that as even. But if you're saying that you'll always identify those pairs as even when you get them pointed out to you, aren't you saying that you know that any pair that gets pointed out to you? So this is a regress. This is not an argument. He says we have to do something to get around this. So he says it's not merely every triangle or number which they know to be such, but any and every number or triangle without reservation. They don't. You have to. He says you can't put a reservation on it to say whether or not I've encountered it. You know every triangle has 3 sides, whether you've seen it or not. So Aristotle says we can't allow this answer that we have to see it before we interpret it. For no premise is ever couched in the form every number which you know to be such, or every rectilinear figure which you know to be such. It's couched in the terms of every even number, or every triangle, or whichever you know. The predicate is always construed as applicable to any and every instance of the thing. On the other hand, I imagine there is nothing to prevent a man in one sense knowing what he is learning, in another not knowing it. The strange thing would be, so he said it's easy. We saw earlier the kid who has the 3 ideas, but he just has to have them connected. The strange thing would be, not if in some sense he knew what he was learning, but, here's what would be strange, if he were to know it in that precise sense and manner in which he was learning it. It's not strange to learn something within your previous knowledge and acquire more knowledge by integrating your knowledge. He says that's not strange. What would be strange is to go within your knowledge and relearn something that you already know. He said that would be strange. For what it's worth, there you go. Now, the next sentence or two here, I think it's one sentence. Yeah, the next sentence here is a long one, 5 lines here. I'm going to read it, but I'm going to warn you, it's impossible. So stick with it as best you can. I'm not going to stop to explain it because, as you'll see, we suppose ourselves to possess unqualified scientific knowledge of a thing, as opposed to knowing it in the accidental way in which the sophist knows, when we think that we know the cause on which the fact depends as the cause of that fact and of no other, and further that the fact could not be other than it is. Recognition of reality, that A is A. I think that's how we can sum that up. That's quite a verbose